Greetings, MacNNers. Well, that was the week that was, and now it is time for us to sit down, collect our breath, and listen to episode 56 of the MacNN podcast. Welcome back, MacNNers. Always a pleasure to have you with us. I'm Charles Martin. I'm the editor of MacNN. And over there in the red corner is managing editor Mike.
Hello. Why does my corner have to be red? Why can't it be like turquoise or something?
Okay, sure. I'll be in the old goth corner, so that's a faded black.
Okay. I'll go with the shag carpet and big old Dr. Evil egg chair.
Oh, ooh, I like it.
Yeah, me too.
It. All right, so a lot has happened since the last time we talked. It feels like 2 weeks have gone by, my God.
Well, it has, yeah.
Oh, that's right. We were all set and ready to do an episode last week, but two things happened. One is that Mike fell a little ill, and I'm very pleased that he's back on his feet, sort of.
Yeah, I'm not sure a little ill is really giving it justice, but let's just say I have school-aged children. They bring home every possible plague.
Yes. Your immune system must be as strong as Arnold Schwarzenegger by now.
Well, if it's not now, it's going to be soon.
And then on top of that, in addition to him feeling lousy, we realized that anything we were going to say on the Friday before the Apple event was going to be wrong. It was just going to be wrong.
Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, Monday, geez. Monday was a day.
Monday was quite a day. So let's get right into that. Let me drag out the music wherever I have filed it over here. And let's talk about the iPhone SE and iPad Pro special event. Okay, so what the hell was the loop? What were they talking about the loop? What was the hook there? What? Was it the fact that they introduced a Black Milanese loop? Is that it? Seriously?
That's the only thing I got on that. What we're looking at is we're looking at steady state Apple. Everyone's saying, well, where's the surprise? Where's the showmanship? Not everything has to be that way. No one was expecting anything super revolutionary. The industry isn't going to be revolutionary all the time. If you look back at 16 years of Apple product announcement, there's only a couple in there that you can say that anything was revolutionary.
Yeah.
The vast majority of every Apple event for the last 16 years has been evolutionary, not revolutionary. So while everyone is expecting one more thing and something spectacular to come out of the halls of Cupertino, it's not realistic.
No, it's not. And also, rumor reporting seems to have gotten better, quite frankly. I mean, this event was largely called ahead of time. There were a few things that varied a bit, but most of it came true. You know, as we documented in our rumor roundup column, a lot of the details changed.
Over time, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the gist of the event was on target. In fact, the only thing that was surprising, and it really was a surprise and a nice surprise, was the revelation about CareKit.
Yeah.
That was totally out of left field.
If there's one thing to take out of this entire event, it is the evolution of ResearchKit into CareKit. I agree.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I've been excited about ResearchKit, and it was nice to get a progress report about that. We also got a little environmental progress report. No real news there, but it was nice to get.
We got to see Liam, the iPhone destroying robot.
Yes. Well, you know, that was something of a surprise, I guess. Here's the thing, though. I want to know. If you set Liam from drive to reverse, can he build an iPhone?
Well, I see where you're going with that, but who knows?
Yeah, well, you know, this would be, because if you can do that, ladies and gentlemen, well, probably still a Chinese factory, but no more people in it.
Well, I suspect Liam is not a precision robot as much as it is ripping chips off the board and things of that nature.
Yeah, so. Go for the shiny, Liam. Go for the shiny. But it is an interesting revelation, and this is what I think was the news that everybody missed about it, is that they took time to mention that this was designed by Apple, that Liam was designed by Apple engineers. Mm-hmm. All this talk about the car project and all this stuff, they have tons of engineers working on stuff. Apparently, robotics.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's part of the green initiative. It's part of the things that Apple is doing for, carbon footprint and renewable energy and things of that nature. There's a lot of waste disposal hassle associated with modern electronics. I mean, just think of the monitors and so forth and death. I have a Philips monitor, but can I send it back to Philips to get them to take it apart when it reaches the end of its lifetime? No. So it's going to go to a county recycling event, and Lord knows what's going to happen to it then. It's going to get shoved on a boat and sent to India, I presume.
Yeah, presumably.
Whereas if you're done with your iPhone, you bring it back to an Apple store and you hand it to them, and they'll make sure that Liam gets a hold of it.
In fact, they should build small Liams and put it in the store under a glass bubble. Just everybody can just watch the iPhone being recycled. I think that would be...
Watch your phone get shredded before your very eyes.
I think that would be cool as hell. So I would just stand there all afternoon and watch that. That's great. But I'm very intrigued about this because when Google says they're doing something in robotics, everybody sits up and takes notice, and it's a lot of press, and nothing ever comes of it. But Apple working on robotics, this is not the first time they've delved into this, incidentally, but Apple working on robotics, they may have foreshadowed something big coming down the pike later. We'll see.
I don't think so. I think this is just part of the, hey, look what we can do to iPhones. I think
maybe.
I'm not convinced this is part of a larger Apple robotics rollout or anything like that. I think this is just environmental stewardship.
You don't think we're going to get Marvin the paranoid android out of them?
Not out of this particular invention, no.
Oh, good. All right. Well, very good. But let's talk about the rest of the event then.
Yes, let's.
CareKit aside, and we'll talk more about that once CareKit apps start appearing and all that.
Yeah, I think it's premature to start talking about it. I mean, there's some interesting things that are associated with it, but I think we need to see it evolve a bit more before we start flapping our lips about it.
I agree, but I will say that video that they showed was very moving. I thought it was very, very nice. Maybe they just really scored it well because, that'll do it. But I liked it. This is something we don't see from any other tech company, although all tech companies are working on projects to benefit all of mankind, or at least that's what they feel they're doing. Apple, I don't know, man. They just have a touch for putting out videos that make you feel like they are leading the charge. Yep. How a big multi-million-dollar, zillion, multi-country corporation can make you feel like they're Mother Teresa, I have no idea. But they do it. All right, moving on to the iPhone SE. Let's talk about that one first. The rumors mostly worked out to be true, and this thing still has a headphone jack in it, so that's a relief to some people.
Well, this iteration of phone was never not going to. This is a retool of the 5S family.
Yeah.
As such, it's going to make it the longest-lived iPhone form factor there is.
Yeah. The first one survived 3 generations, but not as much time as has passed in this one. So, yeah,
and the very first iPhone, that general form factor, peripheral cases did not survive from the original iPhone to the iPhone 3G to the 3GS.
No.
They had moved the proximity sensor in the earpiece, making your phone cases that worked in your original iPhone not work in the 3G. This is not the case with the SE. The SE uses the exact same cases that the 5 and the 5S do. So all those cheap cases at Five Below and whatnot, they're still cheap cases at Five Below, and they will still work on the SE.
Run out to your local dollar store and grab an armful.
I'm going to grab like 40 of them, I know.
Yeah, and then just resell them because now they're iPhone SE cases.
Well, the two big things that impressed me with this is I was not expecting the A9 processor. I was expecting market differentiation with the A8, and I was not expecting 2 gigabytes of RAM. And both of those add up to a very capable, very solid phone.
This one is confusing me, I have to admit, because this is essentially an iPhone 6S that you left in the washing machine and got shrunk, and it sells for just a little over half the cost of an iPhone 6S.
Yeah, the pricing, I don't think anyone was quite expecting the $399 pricing on
No.
that. I think that the $450 pricing, I think people were expecting. $399 pricing, not so much. And it doesn't matter so much now that most of the carriers don't subsidize on 2-year plans, like AT&T Next, for instance. For $13.50, you get the 16 gigabyte iPhone SE, and it's only $5 more for the iPhone 6. So if you're looking at a month-to-month basis, you're not saving that much going with the SE, but it's still a very solid phone.
Yeah, but for people who buy outright, that's a big deal.
It is. For people who buy outright, that is giant.
At least the specs are very, very good, much better than I would have expected. And for those people who do like the smaller form factor, like my wife, for example, this is kind of exciting news because you essentially get your cake and eat it too with one hand.
Yeah, Yeah, it's a one-hand iPhone.
Yeah. There was a vocal group that was really keen on something like this, and I'm glad they got, I would say pretty much everything they wanted.
Yeah, though, I'm the market size on this, I just don't know. Everyone's talking about how this is a flagship 4-inch phone. It is, but I'm not convinced it's going to go quite as gangbusters as everyone says it's going to.
Well, there's North America, and then there's the rest of the world, and these are two different markets. Really.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what Apple says about it. Regardless, the R&D development on this is not nearly as much as it is on a new model of phone. So it's going to be a successful model. I don't really have any doubt about that. And I think it does fill a place in the market for that quality phone and not have to rely on a second-hand phone or something like the 5S, which does not have the newest technologies.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes in the long run. I mean, it is not 6S in a 5S body.
Not quite, no.
The 802.11ac radio is not the same.
Right.
It's about half the maximum speed that the iPhone 6S has, but the thing is that is subject to available bandwidth anyway.
Yeah.
While it is not the same AC chipset, I think real-world performance is going to be roughly similar given people's use of the device.
Yeah. There's also some other minor differences. The screen, we haven't gotten the definitive report on it yet, but the screen appears to be somewhat inferior to the quality of the screen on the 6S. It's not quite the same resolution, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about brightness and contrast and color saturation.
Right.
So that remains to be all tested out, and we'll see precisely how much. The funny thing is, though, that the iPhone SE beats the iPhone 6S in battery life, and not just by a little, like you would expect, by a huge amount. 2 full hours.
Yeah, there's a couple things going for that. Number one is the screen. The screen is an enormous battery suck, and there's a lot less surface area on the SE. And number two, the phone is actually thicker.
Well, that's true. That's true.
The iPhone SE phone the phone body itself is thicker than the iPhone 6 Plus or 6 body is. So I have no idea on the actual area in the battery and as such the power in the battery, but we're going to know more about that in the next week.
Oh, yeah. You know there's somebody at iFixit tearing this thing apart as we speak.
Yeah.
Also, an interesting side note was the Galaxy S7, which, to be fair, is a much larger phone, almost 6S Plus size, but not quite, and has double the resolution of the 6S screen. So it is a huge battery suck, and the iPhone SE beats it by 3 full hours. It's a comment on the S7 more than anything else, but...
Well, I think it's a comment more on the integration that Apple has in hardware and software.
Yeah.
I think that's got more to do with it than anything else.
Yeah. And they seem, I don't know, I got the feeling at this event that they really are proud of themselves for this one. That they hey, look at this. We reused an old design and made it feel completely new. That's awesome. And you know what? They're right. That is kind of awesome.
Well, again, I think that this is a phone where they looked at it and said, well, our R&D is not going to be much to slap in the A9 in here, so let's just do it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I do think that there are prototypes with A8s. I think, and I had a revelation earlier this week. I've kind of thought that the lower model was going to have the A8 and the higher the higher flash version is going to have the A9.
Right.
I'm glad they didn't do it that way.
Yeah.
But again, I'm still a bit surprised that the full A9 processor is in there.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised too. I mean, there's nothing in this phone that demands it.
No.
The A8 could have run the Apple Pay and all that, but I am very glad that they included Apple Pay. Apple has shown us, and we're going to talk about this later maybe, about CarPlay, that they're willing to put out a technology and have it do not a whole lot for a couple of years until it suddenly blooms. Everybody's forgotten this, but that's exactly what happened to the iPod.
The iPod, the Apple TV, the iPod Touch.
Yeah.
For a great number of technologies that are introduced before Apple has the infrastructure to back it up. I mean, for that matter, even the A9 processor really didn't come into its own until iOS 9.
Yeah. And so just as this year seems to be the year, or at least the car model year, of CarPlay, I think Apple Pay is going to take off in 2017 like nobody's business. We'll see.
Well, I think that's as the United States shifts over to chip and pin as a mandate.
Yeah.
I think that the Apple Pay adoption will increase.
Yeah. And I don't think this surprises anyone at Apple at all. They didn't put it out and go, why isn't everybody adopting this right now? I think they thought this will take a couple of years, but we'll get there. And now let's talk about the iPad Pro. Not the iPad Pro, I mean the iPad Pro. Stupid naming. So we're going to have to, I guess we're always going to have to say the iPad Pro 9.7 inch.
Well, there's significant differences between the two of them. The iPad Pro is a faster processor. The iPad Pro Large Edition has a faster, runs a little bit faster. The iPad,
the big McLarge huge.
Yeah, so there are differences between the two models. For no compelling reason I can tell, there's differentiation between the two. But that's okay. Apple has chosen to do so. There might be some kind of, grand reunification at some point in the future, but not this iteration.
Yeah. Well, the biggest difference, most obvious difference beyond size is 4 gigabytes of RAM in the iPad Pro Big McLarge Huge.
Yeah.
And 2 gigabytes of RAM in the other one. So I knew they were going to expand the pencil market because that is just too great a device. I was sitting in a coffee shop the other day watching a local artist sketching. Mm-hmm. She has the larger iPad Pro, and she was sketching away, and I asked her, look, you've been in here for a while. I've seen you working with this thing. How do you like it now after a couple of months? And she's just like, see for yourself. And she just turned the thing around and showed me what she was working on. Stunning. So, yeah, it's a great tool. I think artists have really embraced it, and now they have a little bit more affordable option there. So it seems like a really great device. In my case, the owner of an iPad Air 2, it's not so compelling that I feel like, this piece of junk, I got to get rid of it.
Well, and here is going to be the problem with it. I have an iPad 4.
Right.
And how I use it, there's no compelling reason for me to do it either.
Well, no. And neither one of us are going to be sketching on it all the time. I did like very much something that William Gallagher said in one of his reviews. He was reviewing an app for adult coloring. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't call it that because adult coloring sounds kind of naughty. I should call it coloring for adults.
Yeah, so that does, you have less of a nasty connotation. That is correct.
Yeah, exactly. And he said that if you use a regular stylus with it, it's okay. And if you use your finger with it, it's like finger painting. And if you have an Apple Pencil, it's, an extension of your arm. It's so invisible, the whole thing.
And you forget you spend $1,000 on the pair.
Yes, that you could have just bought an actual coloring book and a box of crayons for $1. But it's true. It's hopefully people will find much more important uses for it than that. But coloring's a thing. My wife is doing it. Everybody's doing it. I don't get it. I like to draw. I like to doodle. But I never was much of a kid for coloring, even when I was a kid.
Okay.
So I'm certainly not one now. My idea of a concentrating task in which I find relaxing is editing this podcast.
I'm not sure that this is going to shift the dial. I don't know if this is going to resurrect iPad sales. I don't know how they're going to categorize them because of the iPad Pro nomenclature. But I think that maybe investors and Apple fans need to come to the realization that the iPad is a mature market. Mm-hmm. And there will be people that buy and there will be people that don't buy. And we need to realize that the iPad does not have the same refresh cycle that a mobile device like a phone has, where a phone refresh cycle is between 18 and 26 months.
Yeah. Just
based on wear and tear. The iPad is not that case.
No, I haven't. I certainly don't have any motivation to get rid of my iPad Air 2, at least not yet. So I'm sort of waiting to see what next year's iPad will be like.
And it's not because we don't like the product. It's not because the market isn't happy with the product. Like Tim Cook famously says, that satisfaction for the iPad is through the roof. It's just iPad satisfaction is through the roof. So when you have the iPad for 3 or 4 years, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Also, I think there is a perception issue in the market. I see this with the Apple Watch as well. So that's two products where people who don't own one look at it and go, well, it's pretty neat, but I can't see the need for it in my life.
Well, I don't think the iPad's like that.
If you get one for Christmas or something, suddenly you do find. I think most people find that they love it very much. It certainly doesn't go in a drawer.
We've talked about the what do you do with it effect at some length before.
Yeah.
And I think the Apple Watch is more like that than the iPad. I think the use of an iPad, I think that the technology is mature enough that you have a pretty good idea what you can do with a tablet.
Yes, people understand that what you can do with it. They just don't see themselves doing it very much.
Maybe.
And I think that will change over time, but right now it doesn't.
I think the iPad is going to have a steady draw, but I don't think it's going to be as much as Wall Street ever wants it to have.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not that peak iPad has been reached. It's just that
oh no,
people are keeping the iPad longer than you would think you would keep a mobile device. People are keeping the iPad like they keep their Macs, keeping it for 5.5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Much against what Apple management might have you say about your average PC being 6 years old.
Also, I think this is yet another one of these technologies that, in this case, I think it's going to be quite a long cycle, but as we get more powerful processors and as we go a little further down the development road, I think we're eventually going to see where people who didn't grow up with computers, they are not an inherent part of their DNA, are going to shift over. I've started seeing this already happening, but the problem is that the rich senior population is too small. But as my generation and the generation just ahead of me gets older, I think there'll be a big shift to, you know what? I don't need a computer all that much. I've got a watch and an iPad, and that's kind of it. A phone, that's it. I really do think that may become the paradigm. In fact, funnily enough, the iPhone SE, I had a conversation with a guy who said this is the market for people who have an iPad because they have a big thing that does the iOS functions. Their phone could be small, but if it has great battery life, that's fine. They'll just put off their iPad-y stuff to when they get to the iPad, and their iPhone will last all day, which is what they really want.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest issue with the Apple Watch is just that I don't need an extension of an iOS device.
Right.
And you and I have spoken about this at length. Mm-hmm. My phone is my extension of my computer, and I don't need it to go from my computer to my phone to my watch.
Right.
It's just my use pattern.
Yeah. And me, the traveler, I'm looking at my watch all the time and very rarely looking at my phone. Speaking of which, by the way, you mentioned in the last episode that you'd gotten a Milanese band for your watch, and I was looking on the MacNN deals column, which I read every day, to check for good deals, and I saw a company called Max Boost brought out a Milanese band, and I thought, why not? Cheap? I'll get one. And so I did, and ironically, it looks exactly like the one Apple just put out.
It does, and I actually like the magnetic clasp on it better than I like the sport band.
Well, as I was telling William Gallagher, I like it. I agree with you completely. I like it very much except for one thing. When I'm typing on my MacBook Pro, my watch
probably makes quite the racket.
Well, my watch band tends to attach to the MacBook Pro.
Oh, sure.
The magnetic part.
You got to look out for that read switch in there, yeah.
Just make sure it's not in the wrong place, or that's going to be trouble. But yeah, I've had to learn how to lift my wrist a little bit, which is probably better for me anyway. Overall, the event seemed kind of scattershot and not as slick and well organized as they often do. Maybe this is just because they didn't call up very many people from other companies to have an awkward moment introducing their product, and then the Apple executives come back and show them how it's done. Maybe that was the part that I was missing, but it did seem a little hither and yon. And it started off with something Apple almost never does, a look back. They noted that they're coming up on their 40th anniversary, April 1st. Mm-hmm. They made a video that moves that all so fast that there's actually a video on YouTube that explains that video. But as you and I were watching it, we saw the Newton come up and then get scratched through. That was a rare, really funny moment for nerds. It was a really good nerd joke.
Egg freckles.
Yeah. If they put egg freckles on it, that would have been perfect. But they probably owe that guy Trudeau some money. Not our prime minister, the other Trudeau. Yeah, the Apple event was pretty nice. I could get very used to twice yearly consumer-oriented events.
The Mac is going nowhere, just based on the sales that keep growing in a market that keeps contracting.
Yeah.
So we don't really have to sweat that. That's really not a big deal, but we're also not going to get the big keynote announcements about a new Mac.
Yeah. Did you notice that they announced on stage iOS 9.3 and said not a word about macOS 10.11.4.
We knew it was coming. The thing is the iOS and everything else, it comes hand in hand with a new version of the other OSs.
Right.
This is OS 10's what year?
15th. This is, in fact, macOS 10 is 15 years old as we record this.
15th year.
It's actually March 24th, to be precise.
Let's do a little bit of math. From 1984 to 1999 is 15 years.
Yeah.
Okay. 2001 to 2016.
15 years.
There's also 15 years. Okay. But let's be real. OS 10 in beta shipped in 2000.
That's true. In fact, in 1999, we were talking about Copeland.
Yeah.
So this has been in process for a while. Even in 2001, it had been around.
So OS X in a full production environment has been around just as long as the classic Mac OS was, including a shift from 68,000 series processors to PowerPC processors.
Now, when you put it like that, the parallel is kind of eerie. That is amazing. Yeah. So we've been talking about the things that mostly Apple has gotten right so far. Let's talk about something they got horribly wrong real quick. So everybody should get the latest operating system versions unless you're on an older iPad. Oops. Oh, dear.
Or some phones, too. It isn't just limited to the iPad 2.
But the iOS 9.3 update apparently made some sort of change that the older equipment did not like, mostly to do with the activation servers, and it looks like it's already all fixed by the time you hear this. There were actually two different issues, and they've fixed one pretty quickly, and by the time you hear this, they will probably have fixed the other. But you didn't test this on an iPad 2? Really, Apple? Really? Because, I mean, I understand that, and Apple's made this case many times that they can't test it on everything that goes all the way back, but they're the ones who have introduced in recent years a long stretch of compatibility. Mm-hmm. OS X El Capitan runs on machines as old as 2008. That's 8 years ago. Kind of remarkable and unusual for them, very unusual for them. But, if you're going to say that iOS 9.3 can run on an iPad 2, not the iPad Air 2, just to be clear. If you're going to say it's the 2011 iPad 2 can run iOS 9.3, maybe you should check and make sure that actually happens.
It does and it doesn't. I think that they're still trying to work out some of the genesis of the problem. One of the problems was that you needed your iCloud password to log in completely.
Right, because of the activation problem. Yeah.
And if you told it, no, I don't want to put that in right now, then you'd get a brick.
Yeah, because then you couldn't put it in again.
I wish I could generate sympathy for this.
Well, one of our readers, Diablo con Queso, and I both agreed that, if you can't remember your Apple ID and your login passcode, you have bigger problems than this update.
Yeah.
You have serious problems. Those two things are something you should be putting in every day.
Yeah, as far as the other issue goes, that still seems to be authentication related. At the time of this recording, they're still working it out. Yeah. I suspect that over the weekend that it will have been completely resolved. But again, with just about everything else, if you've got something you can't afford to live without, we always, always, always recommend you let somebody else get the bad data for you.
Yep. You have said this many times. I go even further than that, which is saying that if you are in the middle of a project that has a deadline on it, then you should not be updating.
Yeah, you should wait.
Yeah.
There's nothing compelling in any of these things that you need to get it right now to interrupt your workflow. I'm not saying that Apple didn't drop the ball on this, because they clearly did, but it is up to the user to be a good neighbor.
Exactly. Yes, I agree. So there's some fault to go around there. This will just give ammunition to the people who say that Apple's software isn't up to the quality of the hardware. And, of course, then you talk to the hardware people who say, the hardware isn't what it used to be.
Well, here's the thing. That's the great thing. There are choices.
Yeah.
If you really think that Apple software and hardware slipped that bad, then get an Android tablet or get a Windows 10 tablet or whatever and be happy with what you've got. I'm not saying don't let the door hit you in the ass or anything on the way out. That's not the point I'm trying to make here, but this is also not the only game in town.
Nope. Not at all. But this reminds me, though, that the guy from Oculus was saying, I wish Apple would make a decent Mac. Excuse me? What he meant was a machine that was all video card and very little processor and was useless to almost everything but playing games.
Well, to be fair, what he needs for the Oculus is exactly what he said that he needed. He needed more burly GPU. But again, this is the Mac fans are saying, we need a better GPU, but no, we could use a better GPU, but we are not Apple. We are not Apple's target market. And I wrote the editorial a year ago.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm trying to figure out why we haven't figured this out yet.
Because it's very hard when you've grown up with somebody, let's say a brother or a sister, and they experience some major life change that you didn't, it's difficult. Let's say they become a member of the party that you despise or the religion that you can't stand. It's on that level. For some people, Apple is moving in a direction that just seems disastrous to them.
And that's okay. That's okay. There's Windows 10 and Android phones for that.
And ironically, I don't think Microsoft's ever been firing on more cylinders than they are right now.
I think you're right. I think Microsoft is doing an excellent job.
Yeah. I see Surfaces around and people not swearing at them. That's new.
I mean, the industry doesn't particularly care for Windows 10 phones, but, that shouldn't stop you. You can still get them.
Yeah. Speaking of fail, let's talk about the FBI. So this week, the FBI, and by this week I mean we're recording this on the 25th, so it did actually happen this week. You're listening to it the week after. But the FBI either cried uncle or blinked, or they're on to something. There's really no clear explanation. There's what the FBI says, which is that some company approached them and demonstrated a method that they think would work. And they seem very sincere about it. But I just cannot shake the impression that they're saving face here.
Well, my issue with this is the company Celebrite has existed since the dawn of mobile computing. They've existed since 2008.
Yeah.
And they make forensic software.
Yeah.
So you're telling me magically you didn't consider their software suite as a possibility to get at the data on the phone?
Well, and there's been further reports that what Celebrite is probably suggesting to the FBI is what's called NAND mirroring, where you clone the contents.
Yeah.
And then you make endless images of these, so you can keep trying those brute force passwords. And when the 10 goes and the thing erases itself, you pull up another image and try the next 10.
But again, my issue is here is this is a known vendor that has worked with U.S. law enforcement in the past. And you're telling me the FBI just thought of this?
And this is a technique, if they are using that technique. This is a technique that's been known for years. It was mentioned specifically by Representative Darrell Issa, whoever.
Yep.
I don't want to confuse him with ISIS. That's the important part.
Okay.
I look forward to his letter. But he actually mentioned it in the congressional hearing, and at that time, Director Comey was like, I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that.
You know what? I had actually had no problem with that response.
Yeah.
We talked about this in the podcast, and I told you why. I would not expect the FBI director to have the technical, intimate details of everything that they tried to get into the phone.
No, but...
Because he's right. If he did have that information, then there's a breakdown.
Yeah. But the idea that the FBI generally did not know about this?
Yeah, the company is known. The company has been working with U.S. law enforcement for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
So telling me that this is a new revelation is an enormous steaming load of crap.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think they're just trying to pull out of this with honor, because I think probably somebody from the NSA, called them up and said, you guys are ruining it for the rest of us.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. But the thing is, the legal fight isn't even done.
No.
The FBI has until the 5th of April to report back to the San Bernardino courts about this.
Right.
But heck, even the drug dealer case.
Yeah, the Brooklyn case, which there were new developments today.
Where there are new developments today, that's still ongoing. And there are other cases where Apple is trying to get assistance compelled for them to get into some of these phones. So this is a PR attempt to try and move things to the back burner so they don't get flamed quite so publicly.
Yeah.
Public opinion is shifting, whether the FBI believes it or not. That public opinion is shifting on this. The more and more and more that this pops up in the news and the more inept they sound,
yes,
public opinion is shifting on this.
The FBI really shooting themselves in the foot here PR-wise. But luckily for us, public opinion doesn't matter in legal cases. But the problem with this case from day one was the constitutional issues, and I just do not see how they overcome that. There was never a good exit strategy here unless they just got a series of bizarro, crazy judges, and your odds of that are low. So I just didn't see that was ever going to ultimately work out for them, because in particular, as you mentioned, Apple has the money to take this thing all the way.
Yeah, where LavaBit did not. LavaBit getting fined $100,000 a day, it would destroy the company, and he shut down instead of having to reveal the source of the Snowden letters. But Apple, $100,000 a day, $1 million a day. Apple's just like, whoever, what do you want the check written out to?
Yeah, right. We'll just use some of that Samsung money. That's fine. This relates, though, to a recent survey. I mentioned something about public opinion doesn't matter in legal matters. And it's a good thing, too, because the trust survey that just came out, I'd love to see how the questions were worded, but the results were that Apple is only considered by the public at large about as trustworthy as Google and Facebook and Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And although I totally believe that the typical person of the public, man on the street sort of opinion, would be about that. Yeah, they seem to be making some noise about privacy, but I heard that Facebook is too. No. But yeah, in the nerd community, we know this to be completely different. Without going into the whole reason for it is, but an advertising-based company, whether it's Facebook or Google, is just not going to care about your data, or well, they care about your data intensely, but they're not going to care about your privacy on the level that a Microsoft or an Apple will.
Well, and the thing is this has got less to do with Apple fans and more to do with Apple as an appliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That goes back to this whole thing where you and I and most of the listeners of the podcast know what Apple's policies and our data are, but the Apple consumer, who isn't as well versed as our regular listenership, they don't have any clue what Apple's data policies are. And they assume it's the same as everybody else's.
Yeah, that's why I like that Tim Cook keeps hammering this. And maybe that was why we got those 2 minutes at the special event. Hopefully they'll continue to differentiate themselves in that way, because this company, this large multinational corporation that by all accounts should be playing it safe, is really putting themselves out there.
Yeah, they are. And that's, I have no problem with that.
Yeah. Moving on. We're at the end of an era. And by that, I do not mean the end of privacy or the end of presidents who are sane. I mean, Intel is taking a wrecking ball to Moore's Law, which was that the number of components in an integrated circuit will double approximately the famous one is about 18 months or so. And now Intel has basically announced that, nope, it just takes too long now. The chips are too complex. And Moore predicted this as well, actually. He's still alive, you know. This is, I think, an acceptable change, but they're ending the famous tick-tock cycle of chip development. And this will have impacts on Apple because, of course, they are the main chip supplier for desktop Macs.
This is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that the tick-tock, which is not actually that new, it just Intel has finally codified it. It means that the second tock is going to be a more refined processor than maybe we've got in the last couple of years.
Yeah, maybe. And this is putting off the move to a 10 nanometer processor. But really, I think that's just fine. I think the 14 nanometer processors are working out really well.
Yeah.
And I think we are at a moment here where hardware is a little bit ahead of software. So the chance to catch up is just fine. I don't see a big issue with it, but it does mean that it will be a longer time before we get machines that really feel new. This is the same kind of slowdown we just talked about earlier in the podcast about how the revolution part of these announcements is dying out because these products are maturing and the evolution takes over. It is always the majority of the announcements, but it is really taken over to be almost all of the announcements.
Yeah, Apple's next major revision, yes, is going to have Broadwell, but the biggest improvement in the line is going to be Thunderbolt 3 USB-C 3.1.
Yeah.
As opposed to the chipset and the GPU being better than the last iteration. So I don't necessarily have a problem with this either. There are still going to be speed improvements. There's still going to be efficiency improvements. There's still going to be battery life improvements.
Yeah.
The industry is moving away from hulking towers and 8-core processors and things of that nature. Yeah. And battery efficiency and portability are becoming the keywords of the day. The machines like the new MacBook, the thin MacBook that still has an enormous amount of power, will still do nearly everything you want it to do. We're going to be seeing that more than we're going to be seeing Retina quad-core i7 MacBook Pros.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
And that's just the nature of the beast. That's the nature of the industry.
And I find it ironic that Apple was always the company that kind of focused on productivity and didn't make that much out of gaming. They paid a lot of lip service to gaming, but they just never really catered to it. Ask the Oculus guy if you don't believe me. But that turns out to be the way the rest of the public has gone now, finally, after all this time. In the gaming community that needs ever more higher nuclear-powered, nuclear-cooled machines to achieve frame rates beyond which even aliens can see, is becoming an increasingly isolated group. That's a alien wears bailiwick, and that's probably going to work out very well for them, but that's going to be a tinier and tinier market, I think.
Well, I think with the synergy with USB-C 3.1 and Thunderbolt 3 using the same connector, I think we're going to see a little more synergistic releases and that kind of thing. Like, for instance, the Razer graphic boosting box is a Thunderbolt 3 box.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would expect we're going to be seeing more of that rather than less. And as long as everyone's following the same standards, which Apple may or may not, who knows, then these boxes are going to be universal.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other things you can do with that. But what I'm excited about is once Thunderbolt 3 is well established and uses the USB-C connector, that means that we won't be paying $25 freaking dollars for a 6-inch cord anymore.
Well, we are. We actually still are. The Thunderbolt 3 still is a transceiver-based technology.
Yeah.
And just because it's using the same connector doesn't mean that the Thunderbolt 3 is the same as USB 3.1 cable.
No.
We're going to be delving into this more. The Thunderbolt 3 cables for the full speed are still transceiver cables. They're still going to be $50, $60 cables.
Oof.
The Thunderbolt passive cables, which are going to give you Thunderbolt 1.5 speeds, are going to be cheaper. They're not going to be transceiver on both ends, but they're also not going to be quite as high speed either.
But that's the thing, is there's a consumer market that finds USB 3 faster than they need, at least at present. They'll outgrow that over time. But right now, USB 3 is zoom, and Thunderbolt 1 is even zoomier.
Yeah, there are architectural benefits to Thunderbolt 3 over USB-C 3.1, but it's not, in 99% of users, it will make no difference.
Yeah, not for quite a while anyway. There's nothing that most consumers need that they have to move that much data around that fast.
Right.
That will change as we go to streaming 4K and other things like that. But for now, it's not a priority with them. And before we get to William Gallagher, we've got just enough time to look at some of the hot new rumors. I started that rumor roundup column a while ago to deal with all the iPhone SE thing and to show people that was the real purpose of it, was not just to report on the rumors, because we've always been awfully skeptical about them, but also to show people why we're skeptical. It's because these rumors evolve like crazy. But I have to admit that in the case of the iPad and iPhone rumors, iPhone SE I'm talking about, it was more like a fuzzy crystal ball coming into focus. So I got to give them a lot of credit. They called the gist of it very early on and largely correctly. We're way out from an iPhone 7, though. And our latest rumor roundup that we published on Thursday, it talks about the iPhone 7 and what might be in it. It talks a little about the future of the MacBooks and the MacBook family. And then finally, we talk a little bit about the Apple Car. Nobody calls it that, except for one guy, and we'll get to him in a minute. First up, oh man, we've got two favorite pundits around the office, and one of them's going to get the treatment this week. The other one got the treatment last week. The iPhone 7, there's a battery that's come out that could be for any smartphone, frankly, because they're all roughly the same size these days. But this battery is 7.04 watt hours, which is less than an iPhone 6S Plus uses, a little tiny bit more than an iPhone 6S uses, and is supposed to be the iPhone 7's battery. This would be interesting because it's a slight increase in power, and that might mean a slight increase in size. It could be that it's not just the iPhone SE that's getting a boost in battery life by going with a slightly thicker design. Interestingly, the rumor mill says that the iPhone 7 will be 1 millimeter thinner. That's about 1/6. It'll be 1/6 thinner than it is now. For the iPhone 7, which oddly enough, by all accounts, is going to use very much the same design. But if they went the other direction and made it 1 millimeter thicker, and that 1 millimeter was taken up entirely with battery, I think you'd find a lot of people very, very happy about that, actually.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah. And I don't think they'd even mind if it was slightly heavier, if it just had more battery. It's our own fault. This is another perfect case of this. Everybody tends to blame Apple for this. Why can't you make a battery that lasts all day? It's because you are now spending more time on your phone than you did watching TV when you were growing up.
Yeah.
Which was 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
if you were in my household. Apple keeps making these awesome products. We keep using them more, and the battery life shortens. There's a connection there, kids. And there's a physical limit as well. The iPhone 7 is supposed to also have these dual cameras, at least in one model, and it's got all kinds of other things. But the thing that I keep getting hung up on is the idea that the iPhone 7 is going to look almost identical to the iPhone 6S. That would be the first time in quite a few years that they've done that. And I don't know. It would certainly be a change, and you can only reinvent the wheel so many times, but really? Are we supposed to think that the iPhone 6S is the perfected phone?
No, I don't know. I mean, the call this week has been for Apple to remove the chins.
Yeah.
I don't really have an issue with that. I mean, your fingers have to go somewhere. The home button's got to go somewhere if you want to hardware a button.
Yeah. And there has been a rumor that says they're getting rid of that, although there's not much credibility on it.
No, for only about 4 years.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why it doesn't have much credibility anymore. This is the company, though, that has kept the iMac design essentially unchanged. The iPad Air, the iPad generally just gotten thinner. The MacBook Air unchanged, and the MacBook Pro's largely unchanged. So actually, the majority of their products haven't changed a whole lot. It's really the iPhone that gets the design makeover all the time. Maybe it is time to quit doing the every 2 years we get an all new design. Mm-hmm. There's only so much more I think you could do. They've hidden the ceramic antenna bands about as well as they can. And the next design, they're supposed to sort of nudge it up to the top so that it's a little less obvious on the back. Well, maybe this is the time. Maybe they'll say, look, this is as thin as we can make it. And that's it. No more. And again, I think a lot of people would be happy.
Yeah, I think you're right.
What I'm waiting on, the rumor I'm excited about, is the MacBooks. When are we getting some new MacBooks? When are we getting some new MacBook Pros? When are we getting a new MacBook Air?
Well, I think we will see new ones of all of those up before WWDC. The chips are available. The Thunderbolt 3 chipset is available. The USB-C 3.1 is available. I think it's going to be soon.
Yeah, and if the initial MacBook, the one that switched to just one USB-C chip, if that was an experiment by Apple to see if this was going to fly, it flew.
Yep.
There's a lot of complaints about it from people who don't own one, but not a lot of complaints about it from people who do. They seem to feel like the battery lasts long enough that they don't need to carry the adapter around with them. They can go out.
It's a focused product. Yeah, the MacBook it's not a machine for me. Just looking at my MacBook Pro, I've got multiple things hanging off a USB, but that's just my use case.
I do think, though, that because one of the current rumors about it is that all of the MacBook family, we'll say, is going to get super thin, like the MacBook. But I think people are forgetting that the MacBook is super thin because it is way underpowered. It's not way underpowered for what its users use it for, but there's a wider range of things that people like to use portables for. And you're not going to buy a MacBook and go, now I shall start my career in 4K video editing. No.
Well, let's be realistic too. The 15-inch Retina is not exactly a hugely thick machine.
No, it's not. But people are saying that the MacBook Pros will get as thin as the MacBook Air is now, and the MacBook Airs, if they even continue to exist any further, will be as thin as the MacBooks.
Okay.
Which means that the MacBooks will apparently become two-dimensional in the next iteration.
Maybe.
Where else can you go with that, honestly?
Well, USB-C is
you need room for the port.
Yeah, USB-C is a much thinner port than the existing series of ports that are on the side of a 15-inch MacBook Pro.
Oh, yeah?
The Thunderbolt 1 and 2 ports are reasonably thick. If you even think about MagSafe was made thinner in MagSafe 2 over the original MagSafe.
Very much so,
The USB Type B and Type A connector, they're not exactly thin. There's the analog microphone port, which has got a certain legacy thickness to it. The SD slot, the HDMI slot, so the thickness of the 15-inch MacBook Pro line is limited by that. If they just said, well, here you go, have 4 USB-Cs,
yeah,
they could trim the thickness of the 15-inch MacBook Pro down, sure.
And the Thunderbolt 3.1 type USB-C thing can be, as Thunderbolts are now, can be converted to anything, essentially.
Yeah, just about.
I do think, though, that one part of this rumor, some of the various rumors we've heard about the MacBook line will probably be true, which is we're coming to the end of the non-Retina screen. I don't think there will be any non-Retina portables after WWDC this year.
I think you're right. I think that the survivors in the Air will get Retina, or the Air won't exist anymore as it stands.
Yeah, I kind of see the MacBook Air line just being folded into being larger MacBooks. So you got MacBook and MacBook Pro. It makes for a much clearer delineation. The MacBook Air is tremendously popular, but I think if you keep those features and move it into the MacBook line, people will follow. Apple has talked continuously about how the ARM-based chips that they are designing themselves are getting to the point where they're desktop class. And the first product that really sort of reinforced that notion was the larger iPad Pro. I'm wondering if we're not, I don't think it's this year, but if we're not getting close to the day when the lowest end, those very low-powered MacBooks might switch. Maybe it'll be this year. Who knows?
Man, do I hate chipset shifts, though.
Yeah.
I've done this twice.
Yeah, they're ugly.
You know, we talked about this earlier in the podcast. I did it the first time with 68,000 to PowerPC, and that was ugly in its own regard. Mm-hmm. And the shift from PowerPC to Intel was ugly too. It went about as well as you can expect it to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both of them went about as well as you could expect them to go. And I think had you had to rely on anyone but Apple to do that, I think it would have been just a frickin' nightmare.
Yeah. I just saw today in my software updates a product that one of the updates, this was from the Mac App Store, it was a third-party one, and one of the update points in the release notes was dropped PowerPC support. Wait, well, what year is it? What?
The only browser you can get anymore is a couple of branches of Firefox.
Yeah, and those are special branches, not the main branch. So,
yeah.
Last but not least, in the rumor department, we were talking earlier about the Apple Car, and it has reared its head again. There's an enthusiast site, there's more than one actually, that really, really want an Apple Car. Now, I get this because cars, especially with men, but are a thing of obsession. And Apple, unlike most other computer companies, is a thing of obsession. So the idea of fusing these two together seems infinitely appealing in a theoretical, not very well-defined way. So I can understand why there are people who are very excited about the idea of an Apple Car. Even if it was nothing more than a well-designed electric car, they'd be happy with it, I think. But one of our favorite analysts is Piper Jaffray analyst Gene Munster.
Papa Gene.
The reason we like him is because once he's decided something's going to happen, he never lets go.
Dude is all in. Yeah.
He is all in. For those of you who haven't followed him, for almost a decade, he was attached to the idea that Apple was going to produce its own television set, high-definition television set. And almost every quarter, without fail, he would tell you when you should expect it. Sometimes it was the next quarter, sometimes it might be a year from now. But it took him forever to let it go.
And as you know, Gene, we do not comment on unannounced products.
This was our favorite part of it. He would send out these letters to his clients saying, Apple HD TV coming soonish. And in every analyst call, the highlight of the analyst call is always the question from Gene, because it was for the longest time a rephrasing of, when are you going to give me that TV? Come on, give me that TV. I really want it. And of course, they just kept saying, no. He finally let go of it. And we thought, oh, okay, well, Gene's not going to be as much fun as he used to be, but that's okay. Good for him. He let go. Nope. He just found a new addiction.
Yeah, I think he's going to be super fun on this in the next couple of years.
Now he's all in on the Apple Car. He is phrasing himself a little more cautiously these days because of the burn that he got on the Apple HD TV.
The burn.
But he feels like he has a greater than 50% probability that an Apple Car will actually come out. He feels like it will happen in model year 2020, which will be the calendar year 2019. A very high probability, and this part I agree with him, if they make one at all, they will outsource it to a company that knows how to make cars.
Yep.
Yes, that I think is very obvious. And he's correct about how we can tell if this is actually going to happen. There will be some stages. Stage one, we're already in, hiring lots of people from the car industry. But it will have to happen on a much more massive scale when they actually go closer to production. And then the second thing will be tooling, facilities that make cars suddenly stop talking about who their clients are and things like that. And then special part orders and that sort of thing. So there is that's why new car models take years and years to get out, is because it's a very involved manufacturing heavy process. And Apple isn't immune to that. They aren't just going to pull it out one day in a year from now and say, surprise, here it is, all done. What's interesting is there's a car show going on right now, so there's a lot of talk about this. One of the cars that's being shown off is a fuel cell car that uses hydrogen. They're only going to release it in California because that's the only place where you can find hydrogen fuel stations. Electric cars, on the other hand, are comparatively mainstream. Particularly up here in Canada, they're very big. Or I should say, the concept of the cars are very big. Lots of people buy them, but the cars themselves are tiny because they're electric. I hate to say, this is like somebody who gave up cocaine and is now doing meth.
Yeah, it really is. It's, hey, whatever gets him out of bed in the morning,
I was reading his letter to his clients and saying, might not actually ship until 2021. And I feel pretty confident, but not completely confident. I was saying, oh, good. Gee, this is good. You're putting in cautionary language here. And then he goes, the price would likely be around $75,000. And I was like, whoa, whoa. Stop, halt. The only reason that Apple would get into the car market, really, is either to revolutionize it or to sell a ton of it, and preferably both. $75,000 car, not going to be a big hit.
I've spoken about this at some length, and I don't think they want any part of holding the whole car.
Yeah, I'm buying your theory that they're working on advanced avionics far beyond CarPlay. Yeah. But CarPlay is taking off. We talked about this earlier, but CarPlay is really taking off. Except for a handful of car companies, you're going to be able to ask for CarPlay or Android Auto, if you prefer, in just about any brand new car, 2016 or 2017 model year.
Yeah, that's right.
And even some of the holdouts like Subaru finally got it together and said, nope, you know what? Our customers want CarPlay. Okay. They're not happy about it, but they're putting it in.
Begrudgingly.
The thing that killed me, though, was that in our report about this, we combined this with some remarks that were given separately, not in conjunction with Gene. Steve Wozniak weighed in on the idea of an Apple car. And I like what he had to say, which is that although he is in the camp that thinks that Apple will build a car, he said something that Gene didn't, which I thought was very good. And that is that it can't be just another new car. It can't even be just another electric car. Yeah. It has to be big and bold, or it's not going to do.
Yeah, I agree.
He's right about that. He mentioned a story about his wife actually was in an accident that totaled their car. And his interest in these future cars, and he made this very prescient observation, I thought, was in the self-awareness, the accident prevention area, which we're starting to see.
Yep.
First, it was self-parking cars, and now we're starting to see cars that will brake themselves, not brake, B-R-A-K-E. Brake. Damn homonyms. Brake themselves to prevent an accident if they can. More sensors, more electronics. This is the area that I think Apple is going into. This is what you've been talking about. Sure, Apple's going to do something environmental, but safety, that's an area where I think the company could really do some great work. Battery technology as well, sure. But that makes much more sense to me. And Woz said it best. He said, the car market is huge. There is a lot of opportunity for Apple to make some money there. But what we're really seeing is the changing for the first time in not just our lifetimes, but our grandfather's lifetimes, the changing of the entire car industry. Cars 30 years from now will be totally different than the cars that we think of when we think of cars today.
Yeah.
Even today. The car industry doesn't change as often as the computer industry, but we are in the middle of an exciting time in the car industry, and that's going to bear a lot of watching, but we'll be there. And as we like to do at the end of almost every episode of the MacNN podcast, we like to hand it over to William Gallagher. And this week, he has an App of the Week pick that is just going to blow your mind. William, tell him the App of the Week.
I want to stick to the letter of the law this time and ignore that App of the Week usually means something new or something that's just been updated, as well as being a very good app. Actually, this one has been updated this week, but even the developer shrugs and says, yeah, it's a minor change. But by chance of what I've been working on this week, Omni Outliner has barely left my hands. Specifically, Omni Outliner 2.9.2 for iOS. It's a universal app. And I realized I was addicted this week when I was walking into a school to run a workshop. Now, I'd planned it all out in Omni Outliner on my iPad Pro. Listen, you're never going to follow a plan, but it is good to have one ready when there's trouble. So I'd planned on an iPad Pro, and I was going to deliver the workshop referring to that Omni Outliner document on my iPad Air. But As I walked up to the gates, I blanked. I could not remember the name of the teacher I was supposed to ask for. So I got out my iPhone, opened Omni Outliner there, and there his name was at the top, along with the venue details, the times, and all of that. I can't count how much I use Omni Outliner for, but I can tell you that surely less than half the time it's for outlining documents. This is my event tool, my workshop one. It's my, this is a really complicated idea, what can I do tool? And I have outlined fiction in it when necessary. I don't like outlining fiction, don't tell anyone. I like doing it more in Omni Outliner than I ever did in Word's outlining tool, and I have thought a lot about that, but I've also decided to just leave well alone. Don't look too closely, just accept and be relieved that Omni Outliner is so good and so enjoyable that I do use it and I do enjoy outlining, even fiction, in Omni Outliner. Outlining, preparing, planning. I'm going to say that sometimes I just think in Omni Outliner. That school visit, for instance, I'm an author, so I've done a lot of these, but this one was different, and I did not know what to do. So I started a few weeks before in Omni Outliner writing down the little bits that I'd been specifically asked to cover. And then I looked for, well, what could connect those and what seemed to follow next, what could go before it, what might fit in where. An hour or two later, I had a day's worth of material ready to go. Omni Outliner 2.9.2 is $30 in the App Store, and it's worth that. It's worth more than that. In fact, it's easily worth, say, another $50. That's handy, as that's what the separate Mac version costs. If you could only get one, get the universal iOS version. Whether you can get them both or not, you only need the standard ones. I'm several years into using this app, and I've not had reason to upgrade to the Mac's Omni Outliner Pro version. That's probably because I use it so much on the iPad, where this week's update to version 2.9.2 is a shrug. It's got some bug fixes. I hadn't noticed any bugs. I have long noticed that you can't search for an outline within the app, and I think that's insane, but you can now search for them via Spotlight. So, Omni Outliner, app of the week, easy.
Well, that about wraps it up for episode 56 of the MacNN podcast. You know what'll happen next week? We'll make another one. Yeah. So we hope that you'll be here. We appreciate that you've joined us. Thank you for letting us spend a little time catching you up on all the great tech news. There's going to be a ton more next week, so we'll keep covering it. And on behalf of the entire staff of MacNN, I'm the editor, Charles Martin, managing editor Mike over there in Washington, D.C., the thick of it all. Thank you. Join us next week, and good night.
Goodbye.
Good night, everybody.